shift your focus away from Ukraine. Both those topics are very relevant in the world order today. I think it's important that we focus on that. So thank you very much, Alexei, for coming on today. It's an honor and a privilege to talk with you. Why don't we start with China? You're a longtime Orientalist. You're a specialist in China. United States and China have a very contentious relationship right now. And we've had a series of high-level American visitors going to China recently. Tony Blinken went, the Secretary of State, Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, and then Henry Kissinger, a blast from the past, goes to China. Would you be able to put these three visits in perspective with particular emphasis on Kissinger? What was the purpose of Henry Kissinger's trip? Was this something that China wanted, that the United States wanted, that both needed? Floor is yours, sir.
Well, yes, you are correct. Beside Ukraine, there are a lot of other topics and issues, and China is one of the main topic. And these three visits to China from the first sight are completely different, but at the same time, they are targeting to the one task: to make China more flexible, less rigid, and more negotiable. I think the visit of Kissinger is much more the most interesting among these three visits. First of all, because Kissinger didn't say anything bad about Chinese politics. That's very interesting. And Kissinger, or United States, was highly criticized by the Ministry of Defense of China, by Wang Yi, the high-ranking person in the Chinese party politics, and both Wang Yi and Chinese Foreign Minister told a lot of bad things about United States. First of all, about the very unpredictable and non-negotiable position about Taiwan. They told a lot of bad things about the United States attacks to the Chinese economics, to the Chinese models. But at the same time, Kissinger answered nothing. Especially, he didn't strike back. That's very interesting. Because the main idea of Kissinger was maybe to renew the Chinese-US contacts on the highest level, and to show that United States could be much more flexible than before. But at the same time, I think that's very interesting, and I'm not I don't want to follow the conspiracy theory, but it's very interesting that all businessmen who visited China this year and maybe a couple of months before was very positive about the cooperation with China, including Bill Gates, for example. And they spoke a lot about the possibility to renew the economic contacts, the economic exchange, etc., etc. Kissinger was also very, very positive. So one of my suspicion, my idea, that maybe part of the US society doesn't want to break all ties with China and to make China more opponent as it is before, and not to push China even closer to Russia, because all the attacks to China the Chinese reaction is just to get closer to Russia, or maybe to to look to the same direction and to follow the same way as Russia. So maybe the main idea of Kissinger just to show that there is another way and another group in the US society that is ready to contact with China in much more productive level.
Well, that's interesting, because you put the onus on Kissinger in the American perspective, as if this is an initiative driven by a certain clique in America that seeks to have better relations with China, not to exacerbate. But Kissinger went to China, which means he has to be received by the Chinese. And so here's a question that I've been pondering for some time now. Let's go back to February 4th, 2022. It's the eve of the Beijing Olympics. U.S. President Joe Biden is not going to go to China. He's snubbing Xi Jinping. He's not going to make his presence felt. Vladimir Putin does go to China. He meets with Xi Jinping. They have a very successful meeting, a 5,000-word joint communique, which basically declares a friendship stronger than any alliance. This ironclad commitment to working together for a counter to the New World Order, et cetera, et cetera. What would have happened if Joe Biden had gone to China? Let's say that he had gone to the Beijing Olympics. Let's say he had met with Xi Jinping. Let's say he had dominated the scene because the Chinese couldn't have ignored him. What would the state of Russian-Chinese relations be today? Would we have this alliance stronger, or this friendship stronger than any alliance? Or, and this is the crux of my question, is there a vulnerability between Russia and China that the United States can exploit? Is China so convinced that it can't work with the United States that it's going to put all of its eggs in the Russian basket? Or are there some eggs that China's willing to put in the American basket if America's just willing to play ball?
All right. Let's be frank. The situation, the feelings about the United States from Chinese side changed a lot, drastically changed during not just the last 2 years, but maybe even half a year. If you look to the opinions of Chinese experts, for example, 2 years ago, the main idea, the main political stream was yes, we should cooperate with the United States. Maybe we will have even much more political frictions, but in the field of economics, of the mutual trade, it should be the same, or maybe even so. Let's talk, let's negotiate. That was the common position, common agreement in Chinese society. But if you look to the publication of the same Chinese expert right now, the situation, the approach completely changed. And the main idea that United States suddenly became our main opponent. And the main problem is not just the problem, not just frictions in the economic fields, not just in isolation of several Chinese companies like Huawei. And it's not a problem. It's just a consequences of the main problem. And the main problem that United States started to attack the Chinese model of development. It's not the attack to the Chinese economics, not to the politics, not to the for example, to the some issues like Tibetan or Xinjiang or Taiwan. It's just a something that's around the main problem. And the main problem is that United States tried to completely crash the present-day Chinese model of development. That's the main danger for Chinese society. That's why even Mr. Biden will visit one day China. I think that the general understanding of the situation in China, in Chinese society, won't change it too much. That's very interesting that in spite of the many small frictions between Russia and China, there are a lot of small problems. It's normal. It's obvious that they exist. But in spite of all these small problems, Russia never changed its mind toward China, and vice versa. The main situation for the last 35 years, that the main approach, main ideas, co-understanding, coexistence, didn't change it too much. And United States, during the last 30 years, or even during the last 2 years, changed its position toward China many times. So, and Chinese society, and Mr. Xi Jinping understands this situation. Another question that there are in Chinese politics and Chinese mind, there are a lot of red lines. For example, one of the red lines, is Taiwan. You can criticize Chinese economics, no problem. You're welcome. For example, personally, I visited many Chinese conferences about Chinese economics and told not very pleasant things to Chinese leading economists. It's normal. It's just an academic discussion, but never try to criticize Taiwanese question, the rule of Chinese Communist Party, the system of the governance, etc., etc. United States started to criticize the core, the nature of Chinese culture, the Chinese civilization, the core of Chinese political culture. And for example, Russia never criticized Xi Jinping. Russia never tried such sensitive topics as Taiwan, Xinjiang, or Tibet. And I think that China understands this position of Russia, and maybe in some case is very, well, say, grateful for Russian approach. So I think that the present day problems between China and United States, it's not just a problems of economics. It's not just a one point of the problems. It's a very huge field of the misunderstanding, miscooperation, mistrading, etc., etc. And this is a real clash of the civilizations. I think that this clash should be happening someday in the future, but it happened right now. One of the, let's say, pushing point, but the pusher was the Russian-Ukrainian conflicts. Yes, that was something that pushed forward all these problems. But the nature of this misunderstanding existed long before, I mean, between China and United States. So that's very interesting, that in spite that Russia and China belong to different civilizations, and well, they have the different cultures, but at the same time, the common threat, the common offense, pushes the much closer to each other. That's my understanding of the situation.
Well, thank you for that. You know, again, I'm very grateful that you're here because I think China is second only to Russia in terms of nations that are not understood by the United States and the American audience. Ignorance is a terrible thing because from ignorance comes fear, and fear can be exploited for political reasons on a domestic issue. And you know, Russophobia is a big problem here in the United States. We use the fear that's generated from our ignorance of Russia to drive domestic policies. We have an election coming up in 2024 where I think China is actually going to surpass Russia in terms of Sinophobia, the fear of China. And one of the reasons is that I think Russia, it's the maturity of Russia over the course of the past several years as a sovereign state has been remarkable. And what I mean by that is, even when Russia made a decision to go into Ukraine with the special military operation, there was a tremendous amount of hesitancy on the part of the Russian political and economic elite about what the consequences of this would be. Even Vladimir Putin acknowledged that as late as September, October of 2022, he had no clue how the Russian economy was going to respond to sanctions, and that the Russians were very tentative. If you watched, as I did, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum that just was completed, Russia's no longer afraid. It's not that Russia isn't cautious. It's not that Russia isn't realistic, but there's no fear there. Russia has been liberated, and that liberation plays out in its foreign policy, in its national security policy, and its confidence. And I bring this up because when I look at China, as you rightly pointed out, there's been a transformation in China over the course of the last 6 months, year. It seemed that China, like Russia at one point in time, was always afraid to walk away from the West. There was always a hesitancy to walk away from the West. There was a concern, almost like an inferiority complex. We're not good enough to be independent. We need the West to be our partner, even if they're an unreliable partner. But Russia has liberated itself from that phobia. And I think China is in the process of liberating itself from that phobia as well. That China is independent. But here's the core question, I guess, from this. We speak of China's global economic presence. We speak of Chinese supply chains and the dominance they have in these supply chains. We speak of the Belts and Roads Initiative and $7 to $10 trillion that China has invested in global infrastructure development. Here in the United States, and I would even say in Europe, in the West, these are dismissed. There are people who say, well, the Chinese control of supply chains is superficial, that it's vulnerable to vagaries of the Chinese economy, that if we sanction China, the supply chains will collapse, that the infrastructure investments that China made are not balanced, that they cause too much harm to the nations that take the loans, etc. And so they're very dismissive of this. And if these assessments are true, I think I've identified the core, the foundation of Chinese, the lack of confidence on the part of China. But China is very confident today, which leads me to believe that maybe these assessments are wrong. What is your take on this?
You are absolutely correct. I think, first of all, China is very stable. Yes, there are a lot of small problems all around China, especially in economics, that is due to lockdowns, to the COVID. But anyway, the general system is very, very stable. First of all, because there is a very high level of the confidence and the mutual trust between the power, the state power, and the, well, just ordinary people. Because for a long time, for the last 45 years, Chinese government always followed its main route to support people, to fight against the poverty, to several problems, and in this way, Chinese state was very, very successful. That's why a lot of people really trust the government. So in this case, Chinese situation is very stable. Another question that let's try to look from inside of China. And for example, the Taiwanese question is very interesting as a psychological challenge, because for all Chinese, for every Chinese, Taiwan, it's a part of the Chinese territory. It was a Chinese, it's still Chinese, and for many Chinese, it's just a question of negotiations. So Taiwan for Chinese should go back to mainland China, maybe not today, but maybe in 10 years, in 15 years. It's just a question of time. And everything was just fine before United States tried to support Taiwan from the military point of view, to sponsor the military complex of Taiwan. So for Chinese mind, it's something very strange and very challenging. It means that the United States tried to cooperate with one of the part of the Chinese territory without cooperation with the Chinese government. That's very strange. Another question, it's a question of Xinjiang. Many times I discussed it with many Chinese, from very high-ranking officials to the just normal people in Xinjiang. What's your approach toward the local problems and the approach to United States politics about Xinjiang? And a lot of people, most people told me, yes, there are a lot of problems with the local separatists, local terrorists, not too much, but yes, they exist. And they try to fight against it. If you have any other way, any other approach how to fight against terrorists, please tell us and we'll implement it. But yes, we try to help not only ourselves, but also to help Kazakhstan, which is on the other side of the frontier, to help Russia, and just to isolate all these terrorist groups inside Chinese territory. Yes, please tell us what we should do. and no one could tell it. The same question about Tibet. Yeah, a lot of people think that Tibetan people fight for its independence, but in the real sense, Tibetan people receive a lot of investments. You know that the GDP of Tibet, for the last year, it's more than 10%. 10% of the increase of GDP. Why? It's because of the investments from the central government. It's not local GDP, it's from the central investments. So it means that, well, we can call the communism in Tibet in the sense of economics. So China tries to support all these regions. And at the same time, from other side, from United States side, China received just critics about it. And nothing very constructive. So it means that Chinese mind could not understand the U.S. politics toward China. And look at the very interesting situation. When China was a so-called the world manufacturing place, everyone, including the United States, including Great Britain, was just fascinated about China and told that, oh, it's a Chinese miracle. China develops very fast. It's something very unusual for this world. But when China started to develop its technologies, high technologies, IT technologies, and started to export these technologies to Europe and to United States, a lot of people from the West say, "Oh no, you don't have to intervene to this field. It's our field." To be involved to, for example, to the high tech, to the biotechnologies, etc., etc. So it's not a question of the economics; it's a question of the competition, not very fair competition. And another very paradox that I can see right now. United States and China suddenly changed its places. For a long time, United States was a pioneer for the open markets, for open competition, for the fair play. So we should come in the prices, in the quality, etc. So you're welcome. Right now, China who say no. We are for open markets. We for non-tariff regulations. We for the free economics. And United States tells to China, no, you don't have to do it. That's a paradox of the present day situation.
Well, it's curious. Again, you're the expert. I'm the layman. So I have observations, and sometimes they could be not based in anything solid. But I look at the United States, and we pride ourselves on a strong, viable middle class, and it's this middle class that gives us the purchasing power that drives the American economy. It's a consumer-based economy that's serviced by industries and services, et cetera, and it makes us this functioning model. Okay, good. We're a nation of 320, 330 million people. China, over the course of the past several decades, has had consecutive 5-year plans where they brought 300 million people out of poverty into middle class. Anywhere between 900 million and 1.2 billion Chinese have been elevated in this manner. If an American middle class, and by the way, our middle class is not all of America, it's actually shrinking as we speak because of some problems here in the United States. But if the Chinese have a middle class of between 900 and 1.2 billion people, and the middle class is considered to be the economic engine, the driver, how can America compete with China? I mean, is this a problem for the United States? How can the world compete with China? How can Europe compete with China? And I guess here's the ultimate question. Can anybody compete with China? Or are we looking at a Chinese century where China controls the global economy in a way that America did for the past century?
Oh, right, yeah. That's why a lot of people, especially in the United States, they not trying to compete with China. They just waiting that China should make some mistake and crash its own economics. That's the main idea. That's why China, that a lot of people in the West published some books with the titles as The Future Crash of China, The Future Crisis of China, The End of the Cheap China, The End of the Developing China. So everyone just waiting when China just will be, well, stumbling and drop down because of the many problems. That the main question that the situation in the world changed a lot. I mean, the economic development. We can see a lot of new markets. We can a lot of developing markets, and China one of these developing markets. We can see that China right now has more than 9 million consumers. The consuming class is very high. If we speak about the middle class, it's 450 million people. So a lot. It's the biggest consumer class and middle class in the world. And that's why China, in this case, is very stable. But China needs, because of the many tensions inside, China needs new markets. So that's why when we speak about so-called the economic aggression of China, it's not real aggression. It's like a bike who could move, stay stable when it moves. So China should move forward. And that's the explanation of the very active Chinese politics in Latin America, in Africa, well, all around the world. China is one of the biggest investors to the United States. Look to the amount of investments of China, for example, in 2016, 2017. It's, if we speak about the year-by-year increase, it's more than 15%, and in the total amount is about 45 billion dollars. 45 billions. It's even more. It's Chinese investments to the United States. It's even more that all accumulated investments from China to Russia from 1991 up to the present day. So China, one of the biggest investors to the United States. And what does it mean, investment? It's not just numbers. It's a support of the labor force. It's a support of new factories. It's a support of the building new railroads, of the ports, etc., etc. It's not just about the United States. It's also the same for Europe, for European markets. And if you try to stop Chinese investments, just to, for example, to prohibit it at all completely, so it means that a lot of people will lose their jobs. And that's the idea of the European politics, and I think also of some politics in the United States, just to push forward the new crisis, not between United States and China, but world crisis, because China and United States, they are both responsible for the stability of the world trade and world economics. And right now it's not China, but United States try to destabilize the situation. That's the real danger, and not just small frictions between the United States and China.
A political question here in the United States for you. Biden is espousing a new term, Bidenomics. He's taking credit for growth, 4% growth rate now. I think we're looking at. He's taking credit for low inflation, low unemployment. Given what you just said, though, about the high level of Chinese investment here in the United States, and the relationship between Chinese investment and American jobs, American health. Is Bidenomics beholden to China? If it weren't for China's investment, would Bidenomics be a success?
Well, it depends on the targets of all these investments. Because if we are speaking about the most profitable fields for investments right now, it's investments to the new markets. And China tries to support not just its own economics, but also economics of the United States. That's very interesting. Some people think that China is against the United States. No. China is really interested for the stability of the United States, because China use all the means, all the actives, I mean, capitals from United States. And China lives inside the US dollar environment. So China is very interested in the stability of the United States. So for China, the politics of Biden, it's kind of, well, suicide. It's kind of very, very huge mistake. And that's why a lot of Chinese could not understand why United States tried to destabilize the situation. Yes, I have an answer for this question. The answer is very simple. United States tried to make it two, say, flashpoints in the world. The one should we can call the Ukrainian flashpoint. I mean the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and another one is Taiwan, who should make a huge problem, not only for China, but for all Asian countries, including, for example, Japan, North and South Korea, and also, Southeast Asia. So, because, if these two main flashpoints will exist, it means that I think, according to the U.S. policy, that the stability of U.S. dollar should be much higher than right now. Because if something will happen in the Taiwanese Strait, it means that maybe the Chinese renminbi will go down. Maybe, we don't know. So that's the main idea. And in this case, in the case of the conflict, maybe some local war or some local military frictions, China will be so highly engaged to this problem that it could not compete with the United States. But I don't think so, because it's a very simplistic approach. First of all, China is highly integrated to the world markets. And a lot of countries are interested for the stability of China. I don't think that if something will happen with China, for example, some conflict with Taiwan, it doesn't mean that all other countries, for example, Central Asia or Southeast Asia, will move closer to United States. No, it's not. It will be just two polars, two points, I mean, United States and China, with a very high level of contradictions. China doesn't want to make this contradiction higher than that they are right now. China is ready for some kind of soft contradictions, and it's okay. But, and I think another question for China, that the Chinese political power is long-lasting. It means that we think that Xi Jinping will stay in his office for the next 10 years, maybe 15 years. He's a strong guy and, well, very healthy guy. But Biden is not. It's not for the next 10 years. We know it, yeah? And maybe the situation